Hello and welcome to another video. So for today's video, I'm going to be participating in the Twilight Readathon. This is being hosted by a whole bunch of people and all of their announcement videos and their channels will be linked below. It's really exciting because from August all the way to December, we're going to be reading a different book in the series. You know, obviously starting with Twilight, which is going to be today's video, and then New Moon, book number 3 that I always forget about, the last one. I promise you I've read all of these. I'm so terrible with names and titles. I know what they are. I know Twilight, New Moon, Breaking Dawn, Eclipse? Anyways, doesn't matter. And then December, we're going to be reading Midnight Sun. I am so excited. So I read Twilight when I was in 6th grade. Like, I flew through the whole series in probably like a week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that. Twilight was one of the books that really got me into reading, along with the Marked series by PC Cast and the Harry Potter series. I think also Gregor the Overlander by Susan Collins, who also did Hunger Games. So this was like childhood core memory reading. It's funny too because in 6th grade, I was doing gymnastics and all of my gymnastics friends were like hating on Twilight and talking about how terrible it was, and I was always like, yeah, I hate Twilight. Anyways, so I read Twilight when I was in 6th grade and I loved it. I really did. I loved New Moon also, was probably my favorite. Number 3, I have no idea what happens in that one. It's a complete blank emptiness. And then book 4 was amazing. I've also watched all the movies and everything, but I haven't seen or read any of the Twilight books or movies, media in general, in like 2 or so years. So I'm so excited to just get back into it. I've been meaning to reread these books for a very long time. So just to start, I kind of want to tell you my thoughts from when I was like 12 years old and the first time I ever read this book. This was probably like the chunkiest book I'd ever read at that point. I felt just accomplished by reading this. I was in my era of like, I need to read the biggest book I could possibly find just because it kept me entertained for a lot longer. My parents were not one to bring me to the library and I had like borrowed this from a friend at school or something. And I remember really connecting to Bella in such like a weird way. Like most of the time Bella is just talking about how she doesn't fit in anywhere and how she's just like an outcast and the new girl at the school. And like I really connected to that because I had gone to 3 different elementary schools, and then by the time I went to middle school I felt like the new girl again, even though I was in the same town as my elementary school. Because like the way that my city was that I grew up in, there was like a billion elementary schools and then there was like 3 or 4 middle schools. And the middle school that I went to had an elementary school attached to it, so everybody who went there ended up going to the middle school, and I was at an elementary school all the way across town. So like these people had already grown up with each other and I was just meeting these people for the first time. So I'd like felt like an outsider and I felt like I never really fit in until I got to high school. Oh, I should probably also say what this book is about. I feel like everybody knows what Twilight is about, but like in case you don't know, it's about this girl who goes from living with her mother in Arizona to living with her father in Washington. And she's like the outcast and she hates it there. And then she ends up meeting this guy at school and like they fall in love. Turns out he's a vampire, and the rest of the series. I feel like everybody knows what Twilight is. Anyways, I'm super excited to start reading this as an adult. I have actually already started reading it. I'm like way at the beginning, like 15 pages in. And so far I'm just loving it. I'm having all of those feelings back of just reading a comfort book from my childhood. I'll update more further on. All right, I'm sorry that the lighting is terrible. I'm working on that. But I just wanted to do a quick little update. I still have not made it very far. I made it to page 47, but I am going very slowly and I'm really enjoying this reread. I'm picking up things I didn't pick up before and I have like so many questions for things, and I'm like enjoying these scenes, like the biology scene where they're going through the slides, and it's like the first time Edward and Bella talk to each other and I just love it all over again. Yeah, I mean, I'm only on chapter 2, but I have like some of these questions. Like they're talking about it being snowing, and I remember the first snow and how Bella hated it and how I just like thought that was so contrasting because I was born in California, and so like the first 7 years of my life I had never actually seen snow. So the first time when I moved to Connecticut and I saw snow, I thought it was amazing, like the most incredible thing ever. And Bella has the exact opposite reaction. She hates it. She's like, get it out of here. And she's talking about hiding in the gym and stuff. And I think it's so funny. But that made me question, when did she move to Forks? Because it doesn't snow at the beginning of the school year. And she's only been at the school for like a week. So if she started at the beginning of the school year, that would mean snow in September. And that's, that doesn't happen. Unless I'm wrong and it snows in Washington in September, but I don't think so. I mean, we're pretty much the same north level and it doesn't snow here in September. It doesn't snow here until like December recently. But then that makes me question, if she did move in the middle of the school year, why did she move so like suddenly? It doesn't say yet, but I know that she moved because she like wanted to give her mom the best chance of like happiness and stuff. But why wouldn't she do that at the beginning of the school year? That part just confuses me, you know what I mean? I think it's pretty clear she moved in the middle of the school year. The reason why I'm talking about this is because it's one of those like vague things that I didn't really notice the first couple times I've read this. And so like reading this now as an adult, I'm just kind of like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why this? There's another thing I want to mention that it's just so funny, and it's Edward's reaction to Bella the first time he sees her. It's so dramatic. He's so dramatic. I understand why he like reacts the way he does, but it's so dramatic. And then the way that she reacts to that is even more dramatic. Like, I get having anxiety, and like the idea of somebody like looking at you strange and crooked for no reason, like it bothers you. I feel like that would bother anybody without anxiety. But like to the extent it bothers her, it's definitely from anxiety. And she like has stress about it for like this whole time, and she's like doing this whole like, it can't possibly be my fault, but it's gotta be my fault because why else would he react that way? And it's just so dramatic. And then the way that she actually goes and sits next to him and like hides behind a curtain of her hair, I never realized how cringy that was. I was just like, yeah, makes sense. She's hiding behind her hair. I've always had long hair, and I've never ever done that. I've even had like, you know, the side part where I had more hair on this side, and I could hide behind my hair if I wanted to. But like, you gotta like lean your whole face forward in order to do that, and that's just not natural or comfortable. So it just points at how awkward Bella really is. Anyways, yeah, totally enjoying this. All right, so I'm now on page 160, and I tried to wait like as long as I can until I can like do another update, because I didn't want to do updates like every 20 pages like I was doing before. Just like a quick thing, I found out that it's March in this world, so she did not come to this new school in the beginning of the school year like I had originally assumed, which makes a lot more sense, but also still makes me wonder why she moved in the middle of the year, like it was not that serious. Anyways, I'm on the Port Angeles chapter where she separates from her friends after like going dress shopping with them and ends up getting cornered by these guys. I don't think I really understood how terrifying that was the first time I read this, because I mean, I was like 14 years old the first time I read it. I just didn't really understand the gravity of the situation. Like, she was actually surrounded by 4 strange men in a city she doesn't know. And there's like no way out of the situation. Like, it's terrifying. It does make me a little bit annoyed because she is being a little bit over the top with her clumsiness. Like, she's saying how she knows that there's like a good amount of distance between her and the guys that are following her, but she knows that she can't really run away because she's gonna trip and fall. I don't know, it just feels like this is a life or death situation, or like it potentially could be. And she's like, I'm not gonna run because maybe I'll fall. Anyways, another situation that I never really truly appreciated the first time around that I read it was like the whole scene with Jacob at the beach. So the first time I read it, I like did not care. I wanted her to get back to Edward, so I was just like skimming through this chapter. I was just like, don't care about the lore, get me back to Edward. I want the romance and the pining. That's what I wanted. But this time reading it through, I like really enjoyed that chapter and kind of like seeing Jacob through a new lens. So the first time I read it, I was definitely Team Edward because I don't know, I just was. But this time, I feel like I can't pick Team Jacob because like he's described to be like multiple years younger than her, and in teenage years, that's a lot. Like, that's a big mental difference. So I don't feel right picking Team Jacob at this point. And it kind of just also puts into perspective how old they are and how much older Edward is than the rest of them. I don't know, like that's just one of those things that I have a hard time wrapping my brain around, and I just have to ignore the age difference to enjoy the story. But yeah, still totally enjoying this. I'm only about like a third of the way through, so I still have a good chunk more to go, and I'll try not to update until I'm another like third of the way. All right, it's time to do another update. I'm on page 300, which is this far into the book, so I'm like a little bit over halfway, I would say. Probably like 2/3. And I've come across a scene that I want to talk about. Actually, I've come across 2 scenes that I want to talk about. So the first scene is a very big difference between the book and the movie that I actually forgot doesn't actually happen in the book. So I got to the part where Bella figures out that he's a vampire, and she kind of talks to him about it, and they talk about how he could read minds and how like him and Emmett go on like their hunting trips and how like they eat different bears and stuff. And Honestly, that moment was so funny when they were talking about like the different bears that they eat and just like why they like to eat them at different times and stuff. It was honestly kind of funny. Just like the nonchalance that they're talking about and the casualness. But this is a very big difference from the movie because when Bella figures out that he's a vampire, they have that whole forest scene where it's way over dramatic and Edward is like, just say it. And she's like, you're a vampire.
I know what you are.
Say it.
Vampire.
It's iconic, honestly. Like, it's an iconic scene of the movie, and that's not in the book. Like, they're so vastly different how it happens, like, book to movie. Honestly, I'm not sure which one I prefer. I like the movie one because it's so dramatic, but I also like the way it happens in the book because it's so funny. And the way it happens in the book is a little bit truer to Bella's character, and it honestly gives Edward more of a personality than what we see in the movies because Edward doesn't really have a personality in the movies. He's just kind of like a stoic vampire. But here, as we've already seen, he spent a couple days just like asking her questions and trying to get as much information about her from her as possible just to get to know her. And speaking of iconic scenes, I also wanted to talk about the moment when they are in the forest and Edward shows her how sparkly he is in the sun.
It's like diamonds.
I love that scene and I hate that scene at the same time. I love it because it's so dramatic and it's just so much. And I love, like, I could picture it happening. I don't remember if it happens in the movie, but I could picture it so vividly. I feel like it does. I don't know, I have to watch the movie again. But it's just like, this is Twilight. This whole scene is what Twilight is, and I love it for that. Like, I love how true to itself it is. On the other side, I hate it because it's so cheesy, and it's so stupid, and it's so dramatic. Like, it doesn't even connect to vampire lore at all. It's like she was trying so hard to be a unique vampire story that she just kind of pulled this one right out of thin air. I don't know, it's stupid, but I love it. And I'm still just having such a great time with this reread. Alright, so I finished Twilight. I don't remember the last point that I updated because it's been like a week between updates, I think, something like that. But I just kind of wanted to give my thoughts on like the last portion of it, like the part where she goes to the ballet studio and stuff, and like the baseball game, and when she finally meets like Edward's family for the first time. And I just have to say, like, the ending where like all the action starts happening kind of took me out of the story a little bit, which is kind of crazy to say because this is like the climax of the book. So we're just going to start with Bella meeting Edward's family. This felt so unrealistic. I think part of the problem is we have Jasper's powers, special abilities or something, where he can like influence people's emotions and stuff and kind of like calm people down and keep a mellow vibe throughout the room he's in. And that's not really in the movie like at all. Maybe it is and I just don't remember, but it's like really super played down in the movie. So I kind of forget that he has that power. So when she's in the house meeting all these vampires for the first time, any regular human would be scared, right? Like at least a little bit nervous. But she's like calm, cool. In the beginning of the scene, I kind of did forget that Jasper has this ability and that he probably is using it on her to keep her, you know, from freaking out. But it just makes it feel unbelievable because it's not really like mentioned until towards the end of the scene. And by then I've already like felt like this isn't it, it's not believable. So that feeling of unbelievability kind of just like carries out through the rest of the book for me, which is kind of just awful because like this is the climax of the book. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the baseball game next. This scene is really fun. I like to see the dynamics of the family and how they interact with each other, and we get to see a different side of Edward, like a more playful side, because he's not too worried about being too strong with Bella, if that makes sense. And that's something that we also don't really see in the movie. I'm sorry if this video is kind of just turning into a book to movie comparison, but I've seen the movie a lot more recently than I've read the book. Yeah, I'm being really quick on this part, but it's just that I really like to see that dynamic, and it's fun to see how they're actual people instead of just vampires. So moving on to the part where they're on the run and they're like making up all these weird plans and stuff, and Bella is acting more unbelievable here, and it's like characteristic to her, but it just, I find it very hard to believe that she acts and thinks this way. So she just like has very low like survival instincts, and she's just more concerned about saving the people around her than her own physical safety, which like it's characteristic with her, but at the same time, like this isn't really something that should be promoted. Like you kind of do need to take care of yourself. Like, you can't just sacrifice yourself as the first option to save the people around you. Like, no. Like, when she realizes that her mom is in danger, or she realizes that like Edward or Alice could be in danger, she like immediately decides to sacrifice herself first so that they will be okay. But like, Edward and Alice are literal vampires. Like, they're literally impossible to kill. I just don't understand why she thinks that like they can't take care of themselves. I mean, her mom, I get it, but like, if she would have gone to these other vampires, like, they could have found a way to help her out of the situation. Another part of unbelievability is the romance, because this is a romance. This is a Romeo and Juliet. It's forbidden love. This is romance. However, we're not getting romance in here. This whole book feels like the beginning of a relationship. However, like 3/4 of the way in, they're telling each other that they love each other. But she's also talking about how she wants to be with him and ask more questions and get to know him more. So how can she at the same time love him, but also feel like she doesn't know anything about him and wants more information about him? Like, that part just doesn't make any sense to me. It feels a lot more like obsession on both sides. It's not even like an in-lust kind of situation, because they're not really talking about that specifically. I mean, a lot of it is physical aspects, but also like the mystery aspect, the forbidden part of it, the fact that Bella's blood apparently smells amazing. I don't know, I definitely like, I wish they would have held off on the I love yous, because it doesn't fit yet, and it kind of just makes me think like the relationship development is done. Like, it's given up, there's no more development from here on, which we kind of know that because like the next book, New Moon, is basically just Bella by herself and kind of learning how to be by herself again. So it's kind of like the relationship doesn't really further from here. I don't know, I didn't love that. Like, I feel like the first time I read this, I was like completely absorbed by the romance and like the relationship and everything, and I was as obsessed as Bella was, but I didn't get that this time around, which I am a little bit disappointed about, because like, if I didn't read this book again as an adult, then I would have only had my first reading impressions, and I would have continued to enjoy it the way that I did, and now I see it a little bit more critically. So pros and cons of rereading old books. Anyways, I think that's all I'm gonna say on this book. I feel like I've talked about this book a lot, but yeah, so that's gonna be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!